Why is architecture hard? Why is it so hard? Why, why isn't it just straightforward and you just bolt in and just do it naturally? Well, it's hard because, among other things, there's so much going on at once. There's so many things you have to think of simultaneously, and there isn't a right answer. There's simply answers. There are architectures work better or worse, but they'll all work in some way, and there isn't a right answer, a right architecture or a wrong architecture. There are simply things sometimes they work better at the time. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people find architecture pretty hard because there are so many things to think of at once. This is something that actually gets better with experience, but and aside from saying that, there's not a lot else I can say about it. Now, something that a whole lot of the world has a great deal of difficulty with is second and third order reasoning. With architecture, you're going to be dealing with emergent properties. That is, behavior or characteristics of the system that arise from the interaction among its elements. Now, the architecture both permits that, allows that, supports that, but is also a party to it. The architecture interacts with other parts of the system and produces effects you didn't expect, and this can be problematic. Now, for most of the time, we try to determine the characteristics we want in advance, and these are the main characteristics. We're really concerned about usually reliability, that is availability, reliability, robustness, recoverability, that kind of thing. We're concerned about performance. We're also concerned about security, testability, usability, and there's got to be a modifiability is a pretty big one to do. So they are the main quality characteristics which we'll explore in a later lecture. But you can't have all of those. They do conflict with each other from time to time. And you devise the architecture in this way or that way to favour one or more of those characteristics over the others. This is as well as trying to produce the functionality of the thing. Now, those compromises and those interactions are not simple and straightforward, so that makes life a bit more difficult. But the good news is that architecture gets better with experience. Now, it's not something you can learn from a textbook or from a lecture. It is something that you do have to do and see what happens. This is not different from any other complex skill. You can't just read about it and go off and do it. You'll have to practice and find out for yourself what works for you, and then practice and practice and more practice. So there are very experienced architects who just deal with something without thinking about it that as a beginner you'd have to think a lot about. So experience helps. So in summary then, architecture is hard because you're dealing with a system that has emergent behaviors, and this is not usual. There is so much going on at once that it's difficult to keep track of it all, and certainly when you are starting out, it's a bit like driving a car. Things are going off in all directions that later, when you're more experienced as a driver, you simply notice, and they are where you expect them, so you don't need to pay too much attention to them. Architecture is a bit like that. There are some things that you notice, they're there, but you don't have to pay too much attention to them. But at the beginning, you don't know which things you do have to pay attention to and which you don't. The good news, though, is that it gets better with practice, with your practice, and there is an awful lot of information out there available.